Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today we're so lucky to be joined by the fantastic Lydia West, who's currently starring in the series It's a Sin. And the first thing I wanted to ask you about is when you were first reading these scripts, because you've talked a little bit in the past about how part of your process is reading the script all the way through, and then the second pass of reading the script really being to look at the character and how they relate to others and how others respond to them. And I was interested in how that really shifted for a character like this, because so much of who she is and so much of her journey throughout the entire series is really about how she is there for other people and how they relate to her in a very different way to other characters.
Yeah, absolutely. So on first reading the script, I only received when I was first auditioning, I received episode one and two. And I was just I was shocked that I was reading and I was like, oh my gosh, firstly, it's amazing because obviously it's Russell T Davies. But I just was shocked that I hadn't seen anything like this ever. And I was so unaware of in so many ways of the HIV/AIDS pandemic. And especially from a British perspective. So I saw it and I was like, wow, this has actually never been made before. Now thinking back to all my knowledge on all the kind of dramas and films I've watched on the period of time, I haven't ever seen anything that was really British and that was British, but that told the story through these amazing group of friends. So that was when first reading episode 1 and 2, and then after I got the part, I read 3, 4, and 5, and like similar to you, I just kind of I broke down at the end of it, and I was just like, wow, okay, I need a moment to process this. Just the story in general, not even reading into character. I was just it's so beautifully written, and all the characters are so nuanced and so detailed and so three-dimensional. They really just come off the page. And then when we were at the read through, we were all reading it together, I was like, wow, this all makes sense. And obviously playing with it with all the boys and with Keely Hawes, who plays Valerie, it just really brought it all to life. And it was just really gorgeous. And it was really easy to come to kind of to know Jill instantly, because she was so relatable, and she is so she's there's so much to her, there's so much depth to her, and she is, I think she's being, it's very easy to coin her as this perfect angel, but she actually goes through a lot, and she's very nuanced, and she makes some decisions in her life that she doesn't necessarily want to make, but she does it from a place of joy and love for these friends. And that's just what makes it so beautiful, that they're these really detailed characters that that you can kind of relate to, and you can just put yourself in their shoes very easily, because they all have such a level of humanness to them. And that was kind of my first impression of reading and reading again, and then being in the room. But it really did come to life when we were in the room with all of us kind of reading it together.
Yeah. I really love the way that the show explores this idea of a family that you create for yourself. But with Jill, she's actually very close to her parents. And we see, they come to stay with her. They know that all of the guys that she's friends with, that she's living with, are gay, even though their parents don't necessarily all know that about them. And so I was really interested in how you thought about that dynamic for her within this kind of recreated idea of family, because she has that, but then she becomes that for these guys around her in such a special way.
Absolutely. I think it's very clear that Jill is she comes from a very loving, functioning, so to speak, family. We don't really know, we don't ever find out, but the way she is, she's very open, she's very nurturing, she's very caring, very maternal. She can be vulnerable with these boys. It gives the impression that she was raised very well, and her parents are very liberal and open. And this idea of chosen family, which is so prominent, especially in the LGBTQ plus community, it is interesting that it's played on screen, because as I just said, it is very important, because sadly so many of these parents, like Richie's mum and dad, like Roscoe's family, not so much Colin, not so much with Eileen, but there's a level of just unacceptance to who they are and to their identity. So they need to get away and meet a new tribe and build their own family, because they're not accepted by their own family at home, because their parents have different ideals and ideas of them, of what they should be. So it was so nice to kind of play with that and to explore that, and seeing where Jill comes from, and seeing just how she is so accepting and loving and caring, it just makes sense that then that's how she is with all her friends. And she can kind of see this, and I believe when she goes home with Richie for the first time in episodes one and two, she kind of has an insight into his life and sees why he is the way he is. And that's why when it gets to the end, I don't want to give too much away, when it gets to the final ending for Jill, she knows that this isn't a shock what Valerie has done, and she saw it coming, and she can simply just say to Valerie that you created this, and it goes way back. It doesn't just start with Valerie and Clive. It goes back way back to their childhood and how they were raised and the trauma that kind of they live with. And that was then passed on to Richie. So all the shame and everything that kind of Jill speaks about, it's so visible from their families. And it's just nice that these boys and Jill, they live in this pink palace and they create their own family, and it's full of love and care and everything that you kind of want a family to be. And luckily Jill comes from that, but the other boys do not, sadly.
Yeah. And then there's also the very first moment that one of her friends contracts HIV and confides in her. I thought it was so stunning and said so much about her as a character, that she never questions keeping his secret from the rest of their friends. And she never questions for a second being there, even though at that point she doesn't have more information. And she is kind of like reading a lot of what the media was portraying with a lot of misinformation and fear at the time. But she still kind of pushes past that to be there for someone that is important to her in her life. So how did even just looking at that particular moment really work as a jumping off point in constructing this character and understanding who she was for a lot of the scenes following throughout the rest of the season?
Yeah, so it was interesting because I think that was a real moment that was a turning point for Jill, and that there's a lot that happens in that episode, and it all starts with kind of Gregory asking Jill for help. And there was one stage direction which Russell had very clearly written, which said in Jill's final okay, when she's saying okay, I will help, Russell wanted to it said okay, and this decision will change her life. This decision will change her for the rest of her life. And she's accepting, it was her accepting this. It wasn't kind of saying, oh, okay, if I have to. It was actually, yes, I'm going to devote my life to this. I'm going to care for you. And this is now who I'm going to become. So that was a real turning point for Jill. And that's the moment she took responsibility for one of her friends. And I think that then going from that to kind of Gregory coming into the house and the mug being smashed, I feel like that moment is quite symbolic, because she, if you can imagine, in 1984, Jill was, there was a news article in the New York Times which said, which I cross-referenced quite a lot, which said that HIV could be, and AIDS could be contracted through saliva. So when Jill sees the saliva on the mug, all Jill's thinking is, you have now brought this virus into our home. And her smashing the mug is just this terror and this rage that she just feels, because this is here now, and this is, I don't know how to get this out of our house now, but you trusted me and I trusted you, and now you're here. So it's all just it was really fun to like play with all these things and all these ideas. And obviously with David Carlisle, who plays Gregory, was just so beautiful to do. But yeah, that kind of then informed Jill kind of going forward, and she has to grow up very fast and very quickly, and she has to do things that not many 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds have to really do. So yeah, she grew up, I feel like she grew up a lot quicker than her time, than she should have, really.
Yeah, and you were just mentioning a New York Times article that you cross-referenced a lot, and I imagine that there was, there's so much material available from that time to be able to dive into. And I was curious about the research aspect in terms of how it gave you a real understanding of what it meant for Jill to be such an ally to her friends, because there would have been a huge stigma against all of them, but also in her, in turn, for even just being in the room with people at the time, there was a stigma attached to that. And so it would have really limited a lot of people that would have associated with her as well. So how did research really help you to understand what it meant for her to be an ally to her friends in this way?
Yeah, so I didn't want to be too well informed medically, because that's not who Jill is. She's not a medical expert. So I obviously I read quite a lot of literature. I've watched pretty much every AIDS drama and film that was ever made. But then following this, I was using HIV.gov quite a lot to look at there's a great timeline of everything that was kind of happening through the years, and that where they were at with the virus, and what they knew, what they didn't know, what publications were saying, case numbers and patients, and how it was kind of spreading. So that I used quite a lot, because in a day we could jump from episode 1 to episode 3 to episode 5. So I had to know kind of where I was at with her knowledge. And yeah, it was interesting also to research also like what the allies went through, and trying to imagine what the allies went through. Like there's a scene in episode 2 with Jill and the doctor, and there's a number of things in play. There is homophobia, there's misogyny, there's probably elements of racism, with this Jill asking her doctor, can you help? And she's even ashamed to say that she has friends, that she's asking for information about AIDS, and she's saying, well, it's for friends of mine. I don't even really want to admit that. So that was interesting to kind of play with, and it's such a different time to where we're living now. So I had to kind of get into that headspace of, wow, in the 1980s, like this wasn't normal, and you couldn't just go to your doctor, or couldn't just search the internet and Google what was going on. You had to see any information that you can and try and absorb it and try and make of it what you will. But when there's adverts of gravestones falling to the floor saying don't die of ignorance, you can only imagine what was going through these kids' heads. So these allies were so brave, and almost victims, that very much victims themselves, of all the kind of the stigma, the prejudice, everything that kind of comes with the virus, really.
It's also incredibly powerful in the way that through your performance, you always kind of hold these other characters' emotions, and she always holds it together. She never breaks down in front of them. She never kind of shows any fallibility or weakness, and kind of really just focuses on the energy that they need from her in the room. And so I was really fascinated and interested in how you really approached thinking about like the emotional energy that she's holding. And then in the quieter moments when she's not in the hospitals or not directly with her friends in those moments, how it kind of like seeps in and really kind of takes over.
Yeah, so filming that, I think that was probably the most challenging part for me about this job, was switching like Lydia off and becoming Jill, because she's so strong and so just kind and brave, and what she sees it must have been so hard during that time. So there was moments in the AIDS ward, we were on the AIDS ward for 3 weeks, and Jill's very strong, and she's at Colins' bedside, and she's keeping everything together. And there was a moment that I just almost had a mini breakdown, because I was just seeing everything, and I was seeing some supporting artists with obviously the makeup of the KS lesions on their face, and infectious diseases, enter at your own risk. And it just suddenly just dawned on me that this actually happened. This is not fictional. This and in most of our lifetimes, it only happened 30 years ago, this treatment. So that was really a struggle and I just kind of took a moment out and just had time to process it, which Peter, the director, allowed me to do. But in those moments that then I could feel the things that Jill would have felt, it was really freeing, because that's how I felt. So it was easy for me to then be just like, a mess. But in the other moments, the moments where she's strong and brave and positive and everything's going to be okay, they were the more challenging parts for me working on this show. But yeah.
One of the scenes that I wanted to ask about specifically, when it does get a little bit more emotionally raw, is the moment where Jill receives a phone call to say that one of their friends has passed away, which they've been expecting and anticipating. And then all of the roommates in the flat that they share together just walk out into the hallway, and everyone just kind of sits there for a moment in absolute silence. And so I was really interested in the journey of filming that particular scene, and that very specific choice to not have any lines of dialogue exchanged, and just to kind of create that really quiet energy that they're all feeling in the moment.
Well, I think that comes down to probably the writing, Russell and Peter, the director, that was their vision of that moment. In terms of playing it, we all were kind of in that zone of just feeling for Colin's death, and just kind of imagining Eileen calling and saying this, and they all kind of Jill had dealt with Gloria's death in the episode and previous few years, but Colin was really close to them. Colin lived in the Pink Palace. He was one of their closest friends, and they saw him just go to work and be good and be quiet and shy and just behave. So it was probably the most shocking death for them, and it was one of the first. So it's someone so close to them. So it's that feeling of just absolute pain that someone who was under their roof and had a laugh with them and said loud with them and just had all the jokes with them is now not here. So, and it just really puts into perspective how this virus, it's not selective. It will take anyone down, and no matter how good you are, no matter how often you were to have sex, if you were what they thought Colin was a virgin. So that's a real painful, gutting moment, and I feel just the silence speaks 1,000 words, and that was obviously the beautiful director and Russell's writing to kind of just have that moment of, this is so painful that it doesn't need any words, it can just be silent.
Yeah. And there's a very different type of scene in terms of the energy that it brings when Jill goes to a protest with a lot of her friends, and then the police end up coming, and there's a scene between you and one of the police officers where they start inflicting a lot of brutality against her, and that, you know, it's a real physical altercation. What was the process and journey of like filming that, particularly because there is so much kind of like physical stunt work and closeness in having to capture that as well?
Yeah, so that scene, I remember it was really, really wet that day, and it was really cold, obviously. And we were a bit stuck because in the day we filmed it obviously all day, and it was sunny, and then it suddenly started pouring, and I think we wrapped at 5 and it was 4:30, and we still had to get that shot of me kind of going through this stunt. So I learned the stunt, and then the stunt men were just, they always marvel at me. stunt people, when they come on set, they just kind of take over, and they're like superior humans. They're just like, you there, you do this and this and this, and I'm just like, okay. So yeah, it was very well choreographed, and it was just a moment of absolute brutality to this angel of a woman, and everyone else is kind of just being escorted away, and Jill is the one who is punched in the face and hit with a baton, and then Richie saves the day. And there was a strong moment that Russell wanted to capture in the script, which is Jill being in pain and being on the floor and looking up and seeing Richie save her. And that goes back to kind of the original love story of the show, one of the love stories of the show, which is Jill and Richie's. That story is so strong, and so they have such a bond that only Richie could come in the middle of a protest after not being expected and save Jill, theoretically. So yeah, it was really special to film, and it was really good fun, and it is brutal and horrendous to watch.
Yeah, and Richie's played by the fantastic Ollie Alexander. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about their dynamic, and actually in particular, a lot of the songs that they end up singing together on stage at the bar that they frequent. Because I heard that you were also working with a vocal coach on some of those before the two of you even met up and started working on that together. What were some of the valuable things that vocal coach was able to help you with in kind of like finding some of, you know, what you wanted to bring into those performance moments?
Yeah, I think the vocal coach, I'm not obviously a trained singer and don't really sing, but so the vocal coach kind of wanted to bring out the character through song. It wasn't about being the most technically correct, beautifully delivered song. It was more just about bringing that friendship, and that they're singing to get an equity card. They're not trying to be professional singers, they're trying to be professional actors. So it's really just a bit of fun what they're doing, and they're singing all these hits, and you can imagine they heard it on the radio, and then they rehearse in their room, and they go to these working bands clubs and they sing them, and no one's listening and everyone's kind of chatting away, but they're loving life. They've got the costume, they've got the outfits. So it was really fun to work with the vocal coach to kind of bring that personality and bring the characters to try and bring the characters through in the songs. When I first met Ollie, I was obviously extremely nervous because I'd seen his Glastonbury performance, and he's an international pop star and I'm not. So I was like, oh my God, okay, here he comes. He's coming in. I was singing the French Revolution, the musical number, and he walks into the room, and I just carry on singing, and I'm just like, oh my God, my voice is so shaky right now because I'm so nervous. And then he's just the most joyous, lovely, kind human that I've ever met, and he's just like, oh my God, hi, I'm I'm so nervous to meet you. And I'm like, I'm nervous to meet you. So then we had like a little kind of mutual fan appreciation moment for each other. And then we just got singing, and within an hour we had to perform it to the director and the producer, and they were like, it's like you guys have known each other for years. And we were just like, oh, great. So yeah, approaching those scenes, we just kind of had as much fun as we could, and we didn't take it too seriously. We tried to have fun with it.
Yeah. Once the two of you were working on a lot of the scenes together prior to shooting, did you find that there were elements of their relationship and their friendship that you really just uncovered that maybe you hadn't had the opportunity to fully discover when it was just you sitting at home working with the scripts beforehand?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that goes with the relationship with everyone. I would obviously kind of try and read and learn the lines, obviously, for the night before. But the moment you get on set and you're reading with an actor, and you're blocking out the scene, and you're in costume, and the set's all there and everything, it all just puts the story together. You can't, I can't really make sense of anything until I'm in the room with the other person, because you don't know what they're going to give you. And for example, in episode 5, the scenes with Keely, we didn't have a chance to rehearse, and she wasn't at the read through. So it was the first time really reading together when we were on the pier in freezing cold Wales. So I didn't have any idea what Keely was going to bring to that scene, and all we both had to do was kind of listen and respond. And yeah, it just came to life, and I did not expect the way it was in my head, reading it from the first day I got the scripts to now the finished product, is so vastly different to what I could have imagined.
I also really love the way that the two of you, even when the scenes between the two of them and their lives become a lot more emotionally harrowing later in the series, there's still just always that sense of like energy and vitality and sense of humor that they've always had together, that they still carry through no matter what the circumstances are around it. Was that something that was like a really conscious choice? You know, it's obviously in the script, but in terms of like the energy in the scenes, was that a really conscious choice that the two of you consistently made?
Yeah, I think we wanted to portray just the joy of friendship, and even in the face of death and everything that's happening, just the love that we had for each other, and just the fun that we had, and those things, because they still go on. And Russell said that this is very, very sad, and I it's such a devastatingly sad piece of work, but you can't play the sadness. You can't play that, because it's there. It speaks for itself. What you can play is the joy and the fun and the love, because that's what is bigger, and it's more, it's harder to do. So I think we kind of took that and tried to do as much of that as we can, just to show how much friendship was just everything for these group of friends, and this family, this logically chosen family that they all came to be, was how strong it was, how strong that bond was, and the inside jokes, the kind of the way they do the lads, like that's all part that things that we have with our closest friends that you don't really see unless you're in it, unless you're in the friendship group. You don't really know what happens between friends. So being able to see that on screen, it's like, yeah, I have this private joke similar to that with my best friend, and we say that kind of thing, and we just say silly voices and do these things. It's just all real, and that was really fun to play with. So I think we tried to heighten that as much as we could, but also make it realistic, not just be like because we would not have a drama if we were just screaming about.
And overall, with your character Jill, she's actually based on one of Russell Davies's really close friends from that time. But I kind of thought it was a really interesting choice that he didn't tell you that, you know, you were going to get the opportunity to not only meet her, but that she was going to be playing your mum in the series until the day before you had the table read. But what's so great about that is it gave you such an opportunity to just really build this character in the way that you envisioned her from what you'd written, but then you still had the opportunity to ask her questions. And I was interested in what were some of the things and the details that she really gave you from those conversations that then came into play with some of the scene choices that you ended up making, or like how you thought about Jill's response to certain moments.
Just kind of the way she described her activism and the things she did, their life in the Pink Palace, the parties they had, all the fun they had. She worked in the West End, so that kind of side of like working doing 8 shows a week, and then going to to the hospital at night and caring for her friends. So just getting that insight of actually what she did and the dedication that she devoted her life to these boys for was just so, it was such a great source of inspiration to kind of make fictional Jill just as devoted as she was. So, and just as selfless as she was. And I think the real life Jill is so humble, and she even says herself that, oh, I wasn't a mother, I don't want to come across as Mother Teresa, and I didn't do all the, but and that's how fictional Jill is. She's so humble. She doesn't ever ask for thanks. She doesn't want a round of applause. She's happy to sit in the background and not say what she's doing for these boys. When Valerie comes into the hospital, she doesn't want to admit that she's there every day. It's Ash that says Jill's here every day. She's caring for these boys, and Jill doesn't want it. She's just completely humble, and just she does it from such a place of love and care that's what I really got from real life Jill. So as much as I didn't take anything directly from her in terms of her mannerisms and the way she was, just having such a person on set who was so insightful on the era, on the time, and who lived exactly the same kind of lives was great help.
Yeah. And this was your second time working with Russell Davies after years and years. What are the ways in which your collaboration really kind of evolved in terms of the way that you work together collaboratively?
Yeah, so I think it's quite similar, really, when I think about my experience with Years and Years and It's a Sin. Russell knows exactly what he wants from all of his actors and from his story. He knows his scripts better than anyone. So it's so great to have someone that you can call upon any time of day to ask anything about the story. So there'll be times that we have a scene the next day, and if I was unsure of kind of how he wanted it delivered or what kind of message he wanted, what intention he wanted, I would just shoot him a text and he would reply within seconds exactly what he wants. He has pure clarity on everything he wants with his stories, and that is it's so refreshing to work with someone who just knows what they want, because if you are, he'll be completely honest with you. If you are delivering, he'll send you a message after with notes on the rushes and how he enjoyed them and how he was happy and proud and all of these things. And that just it's what I need and what I enjoy at the end of the day. We're trying to tell a story, and we're trying to tell it in the most truthful way as possible. So for someone who's a creator and writer and executive producer to message you and say, you did this exactly how I wanted it, it just gives you the absolute validation that you need, and going forward just tells you how to kind of to tell the story and to approach other scenes. So Russell had the exact same treatment with me in Years and Years as It's a Sin, and I'd missed it because it had been a year since we'd worked together, but it was the exact same. And it's just such a joy working with such an incredible mind that has that that has that just dedication. And it's because he loves all his work and he loves his project. It's a Sin was made from such a place of love and his own life, and it took him so long to make and create, which he's mentioned in interviews, that it makes sense. It makes perfect sense that he would be so on board and so involved in every single part of the process.
And given how poignant this entire series is overall, and especially with how personal it is to Russell and the amount of time that, he's been thinking about this project, what do you feel proudest of in terms of like the way that you portrayed and capture this character of Jill in the series overall?
So I feel very proud just to be involved in something that tells such an important story. I think what we're going to do with the project is hopefully raise awareness of kind of what happened, is honor those lives that we lost, generations that now are sadly no longer with us, that sometimes forgotten in history. The fact that I didn't know much about the history is just true testament to how many people might not know. So if we can kind of educate people on what happened, on the era, through a place of absolute joy, I think it will do a lot of good. And also in kind of bringing that to the present day and trying to eliminate the stigma and the shame and the prejudice that still surrounds HIV and AIDS. I believe if we can start that conversation, then we can help people. So I just feel super proud and honored to be telling such a story that could change a number of people's lives, really.
Yeah. Well, the
Very
series
special.
overall is so fantastic. Like, it completely pulled me in with the energy and then completely broke me in all the right ways by the end. And is one of, it's something that will really sit with me, and hopefully with a lot of audiences long after they watch it. And thank you so much for talking with us all about this today.
Thank you so much.